Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I'm your host, Kushan, and today I am going to be playing more Command Modern Air and Naval Operations. Actually, playing is not really the right term. Today I'm actually going to be continuing work on my 1950s battleship scenario, Queen of the Seas. Just as a recap, this scenario pits some hypothetical Soviet battleships versus American and British battleships in 1950. Um, I also lost the original scenario that I had started a couple weeks ago. I made the mistake of accidentally saving over the scenario when I was doing some testing, and as you can see here, I've started relaying out. These are the British battle groups over here, or possible options for the British battle groups because they are randomized. But today, what I'm going to be working on is starting the scripting and mission setup for both the um, NATO and for the Soviets. Um, I've actually, even though I did lose the original scenario, I have been continuing to work on the scripting for it these last couple of weeks. So let's go ahead and get started. So go into the event editor, and first thing I want to do is I want to set up some um, First thing I want to do is I want to set up some reference points. So the Soviets are basically, they've come out of Kola and they're coming through the GUIK gap. Um, so what I want, so their patrol zone is probably going to be down here. I want a big kind of open area of water for them to spawn in. So what I want to do, sorry about that, was checking something. So I'm going to take some points here. First off, where actually do I want these units to spawn? I'm going to probably take a point here. I'm actually going to paste these into my text document off here off to the side. So we have a point here. Actually, just for reference, let's go ahead and add. So I think that's a good kind of spawning area for them. So they'll be somewhere either right over. I may even want to pull this back farther north. Mm, Honestly, not too sure where I want this. Originally, I was hoping to have kind of the main fighting taking place here, kind of between Iceland, Greenland, and the UK. But given where NATO is going to spawn, I think I am going to pull this back a little farther. We'll pull it just kind of onto the inside of the Faroes. I think those are the Faroes Islands. And then we'll pull this reference point back a little bit. And then so the NATO spawning points will be those two, and then we'll spawn. We're gonna have a much wider area for NATO to possibly spawn in. So they'll spawn anywhere from off of here, off of Newfoundland, all the way up to Iceland. Move that over a little bit. No, I don't want to move that. I actually want to add another new point. Obviously, these are all on the wrong side. These aren't the final points that I'm going to be using. These are just kind of to kind of visualize for myself. So 135, 36, 37, and 38 here will be the Soviet spawning. The NATO spawning area will basically be the 135, 139, 140, and 141. So they'll kind of spawn anywhere from off of Newfoundland and Canada to Greenland to the UK and Spain, kind of making up the border there. And so what I want to do now is I'm going to be writing basically to sorry, I'm messing with windows over here off to the side real quick. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be writing a script to kind of keep all these points because I am going to need these ones over here on the Soviet side. So I am pulling up. Just pulling up some reference point code from a different scenario of mine. All right. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so we will do the NATO points first. Now, if you hit Control X, it'll copy the latitude and longitude of your of where your cursor's at. Keep pulling up the wrong window. So there's point 1, and they go clockwise. There's point 2. These don't exactly have to be exact, obviously. So one of the other things I've done is I have completed the outlining for the various options for the Soviets. They're unplayable in this, but in this particular scenario. But they do have several different kind of structures for how their forces are, which range from the first option basically is you have all 16 of their battleships, their cruisers, all grouped up into one massive kind of fleet, and then from there it kind of breaks down into like groups or two groups of 8 battleships each, with the cruisers split evenly, and then that subdivides into 4 groups of 4 battleships apiece, and then you've got 8 groups of 2 battleships apiece. And then I've been slowly kind of putting some thought into what I'm going to do for the Soviet air or potential air support. There is no there. I should rephrase. There's the possibility of carrier support for both sides, but only one of the American options actually has a carrier. Other than that, it's going to be a random roll. And they're going to be light carriers. They're not going to be maybe one Essex class, but other than that, you're not going to have like 3 or 4 carriers. I really want this to be kind of a dueling battleship scenario and not get overwhelmed with well, let's just launch fighter strikes at everything. All right, so there's our 4 points. And actually, before I forget here, I want to make a backup of this scenario because I don't want any repeats of what's already happened. The premise of this scenario is really I just wanted to pit pit the hypothetical Soviet battleships versus their potential or versus their NATO equivalents. So you've got Iowas and Montanas, the Vanguards, the King George Fives versus the Soviet October Revolution class battleships. And what the Soviets are really trying to do is basically use their capital ships, like the Germans used the Bismarck or tried to use the Bismarck, and their cruisers, in that they're trying to basically break them through past Iceland and Greenland and basically get them into the trade lanes to basically intercept convoys. All right, so back to what I was had started to do there before I had get distracted making backup. So this is going to be for the NATO side. actually. This can be for the ex-NATO. So I actually have a couple of different sides here that I've created. I've added a couple more. Originally, I had just the NATO and USSR, which are the two, I don't want to say playable, but the two actual sides. The ex-NATO, ex-scripts, and ex-USSR basically stand for unused stuff. For instance, all the ships that aren't being used on the NATO side are basically stashed on this ex-NATO, and then the script actually will change their side to the player. Um, and the same thing for the Soviets. Their unused ships basically are on the ex-USSR, and then they get basically changed sides and then moved into their spawn zone on the USSR. And then I have an ex-scripts, which is basically where I put things like reference points and such like that. That way they're actually not seen by the player. So we're just going to call this um, give them unique names. So NATO spawn 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm actually going to just make that the full screen. So 0.1. Yeah, the Soviet hypothetical battleships are really kind of really underused, I think. Or I guess this a lot of the hypothetical units really aren't used all that much, but um, like 1950 I found, and when I was doing research for this, is really kind of like the only year where it's actually viable to actually have like battleship versus battleship combat. Like if you go more towards like into the early 50s, a lot of them have either been laid up and retired, or there's just so many carriers for the NATO side that they would never even commit their battleships. And also 1950 also has the advantage of, or at least when this scenario would take place, which is June, which I haven't changed the timing yet, is that the Korean War has started, so a lot of the U.S. carriers would be over here in the Pacific, and so it's kind of my reasoning for why they've committed the battleships. One of the other scenario ideas I've been tossing around is a NATO carrier raid on like Murmansk, set in like about the same time period, about 1950. So you'd have like maybe the two Saipan class and maybe an Essex class and maybe a British carrier. And basically, your goal would basically be to do an air raid on Murmansk. So kind of taking the the normal kind of NATO Cold War strategy and mixing it up. All right, so then okay, so these should get us. So there's the NATO spawn points. And then I can take that. actually going to move that back up to my other screen. All right, so this will be the USSR. Oh, never mind. I was copying things to the right spot. That point there is actually going to be all right. So there's the spawning points for the two sides. Next, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. A lot of the Imperial Japanese vessels from the like 1945 are actually in the database. I know like the Huryu, Soryu, a lot of their fleet carriers that were sunk early in the war are there. I believe I don't think the Yamato is, but I believe the Congo class battleships are, and there's a couple others in there as well. Um, I can show you. So if we go to not ship, no, IJ. Yeah, so you got the Akagi, the Shio, the Chitos. Not sure what that is. That's a light carrier. Fubuki, Huryu, Hosho, Kaga, the Kongos, Nagatos. I mean, Zuikaku, Shokaku. I mean, a lot of mainly it's their fleet carriers, but there are some battleship and cruisers in there. If I actually had a choice, I would actually like to see some of the World War I would like to see, I think, like the Yamato in here. I'm surprised it's not. But I think I'd also like to see like the Bismarck, the Tirpitz, Prinz Eugen, some of the German World War II vessels. Next, I think there is one or two of the heavy cruisers in there. All right, so there are the NATO and Soviet spawn points, so I can get rid of those. Um, delete selected reference points. So that's out of the way. What is next? I need the patrol zones. So first of all, let's go to X NATO. If I open up the script console and run that, I should get Mm, where's my fourth NATO spawning point at? That's only 3. Well, that's a little weird. Did I enter the wrong lat and latitude or something? Okay, that's strange. So let's just kind of go over here. Just fixing a script. So let's go ahead and um, see if I deselect all reference points. Thought there was a select all reference points. I wonder where that last reference point actually got created at. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but no, I'll hunt it down later. So we don't need those, delete those. Let's try this again. There we go. All right, so there's my NATO spawning area. Um, so I think I'm happy with that. Now the script that I'm going to be running should take into account the fact that there is some land potentially in the spawning area and shouldn't actually spawn the ships on there. So we should be good on that front. No, that should be good. So let's switch to the USSR. And reopen the console. Awesome. And there is the Soviet spawning area. Now I need to actually look into what are the um, I'm gonna pull the script console up because I actually want to see something else. I'm gonna look into oh, oops. I made more reference points on the other side. I guess it doesn't double create. Oh, I thought when I ran that script that. All right, so we got those back. And so I think that trying to decide where I want the Soviet patrol zone to be. So they need to basically get somewhere in this area here, I would think. So you've got convoys coming out of New York. They kind of, turn up and then I'm assuming they would run along Newfoundland and then basically cut across, or they would go way up there and then come down. But let's say they take a southern route. They're going to come up to Newfoundland and then kind of come straight across the Atlantic. So pretty much where, so we'll give them a patrol. Of Say NATO points 3 and 4 will be their patrol zone. Maybe we'll just do it as NATO 4, because I don't think I'm going to want them to get that close to shore, or even over there where point 4 is. So they'll, I should have kept all these on 1. So they're going to spawn up here. So let's see their patrol area.